Hi everybody, welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk, sponsored by Inglis and Darley. My name's Bren O'Brien, and joining me as per usual is Tim Rowe. This week we review the Magic Millions national sale and speak to Managing Director Barry Bowditch. We look at changes in the thoroughbred breeders in Australia and mare movements at Sedgemoor. We have a special interview with Anthony Mithen and Todd Magnier after a big weekend for Starspangledbanner. In racing, Peter V'landys to take long service leave, Racing New South Wales and the ATC back in court, and an interview with former ATC board member and renowned breeder Julia Ritchie. Finally, in wagering, changes at the top at Sportsbet. Tim, we've just concluded the Mares in Foal session, the second day of 2 days here for the Magic Millions National Broodmare Sale. We've had the Weanling Sale on the week. We've got the Yearling Sale coming up. It is funny. Someone explained this to me today, which was in a way which I thought was interesting. The Weanling Sale is pretty much breeders trying to sell to traders and some trainers. The first day of the Broodmare Sale is trainers and racing syndicators trying to sell back to breeders. Today is breeders trying to sell to breeders. And then next week we've got the breeders trying to sell back to the syndicates and the trainers again. It is an interesting week because every day is a different market, isn't it?
It is, and from the auction house's point of view, the ideal horse is one that goes through all those segments and they clip the ticket and get commission on every one of them, and that's their ideal horse. But it brings the industry together, a lot of participants, and a good opportunity to sort of chat before the winter hiatus, I guess, and into the foaling and breeding season. So, a lot of people on the Gold Coast. Weather hasn't been perfect, but it's been a solid week's trade, I'd have to suggest. I think in the current market, I think certainly Barry Bowditch was satisfied, and I think that's a fair reflection just where the market is rather than company by company.
Yeah, and I think it is the nature of it at the moment. I mean, these breeding sales, we speak about them a lot, but they're actually really important for the industry because they enable the big studs to set up their plans for the spring and either buy fillies off the track that they're able to put to stud, but also buy mares in foal and trade out and all that sort of stuff. It's a big part of the liquidity in the market. It has changed this sale. I mean, the mare sales have anyway, haven't they? We've lost the Australian broodmare sale from Inglis. That's now pretty much gone online now. So we've only got the Chairman's sale in Sydney. A day and a half or sort of 2 days here. This sale, I think, used to be 3 or 4 days, probably longer, didn't it, Tim? In terms of the broodmare sale. Really, the market's very keen when they bring to market here are things they think are highly appealing, sort of more top-end offerings. And, it was kind of interesting to see how it worked out this year. And, it plays an important role, but probably this year there wasn't the absolute mega top-end quality. It was there across the board.
Yeah, they're just not available, or they don't exist, or they're already owned by breeders. And I'm, not singling out Yulong, but they do own a few that they've bought privately. 2 and 3-year-olds that probably be racing on next season, definitely. But it's just this year for whatever reason there's fewer top end mares available, and then the lower end, the cost of getting a horse to a live auction is significant, whether it's Sydney, Melbourne, Gold Coast, or around the country for yearling sales. So you've got to have the product, to warrant that extra cost with accommodation, staff, and everything else. Just with the ease of online, and I sort of put this question to Barry a little bit in the interview, but someone suggested to me that if you've got a nice mare that sort of confirmation wise, you bring it to an auction, and if it's probably a little bit ugly or something, perceived fault, at a lower end, of course, you sell it online. That's just the way that probably, placing a horse in the right sale is an important factor in trying to maximise your return.
Yeah. I mean, not surprising. Yulong have dominated this mare markets for the last 5 years, and they dominated again with sort of the top purchases, both on the first day with Legato and Miss Hellfire today in foal as well. So it was interesting in that regard, but I think also, I think what will happen, Tim, and there's probably some questions around this as, we've had this consolidation within Yulong at that top end. They've got, whatever they've got, 600 or 800, depending if you ask mares. It will impact the market at some point if they retain these families and don't bring them back to the market. While Yulong aren't selling the mares market, they will trade out as a mares. But, you can kind of see moving forward that that may have some impact on these sales moving forward as well.
But they're not buying as many in numbers. There was a period there where they were buying from online from 5,000 up to, 4 million, 4 and 6 million territories. But certainly it's evident this week they weren't buying, too many $100,000 horses and things like that. It is about and Jun Jang said this week, that, it's about quality, particularly with acquiring Sejin Ho to sort of have 150, 160 mares there. It's pure quality to support, Devil Knight and Private Harry and Continue Alabama Express. Those stones are going to get great support with the mares' depth that they've got.
And he was the chat that you had with Barry Bowditch after the second day of the Magic Millions National Broodmare Sale.
I'm extremely satisfied, to be honest. I thought going today, I was, wondering where we would land with the mares in foal. I thought it could have been a little bit more volatile than what it was, but I thought it was a very genuine market again to clear, 80% overall, to still average 220,000 and to have a gross of, as you said, 66 million and a median, which is up on last year, 105,000. I felt were really solid numbers, and most pleasing today was probably the thirst all the way through to the end for the mares in foal. I think when a quality mare walked in, there was plenty of competition. There were willingness to participate, and I think at a count there was 16 mares in foal make over $500,000, which is exceptional.
Is it unfair to make year-on-year comparisons, just given the volatility of the quality of mares that go?
Yeah, a mare catalogue's never apples with apples, I don't think. And, obviously less numbers and, a different type of catalogue what we had last year. It's hard to compare, but, I think the numbers and where we ended up is above the expectations that we thought we could achieve leading into the sale.
On the back of this sale, and obviously Chairman's, can we read into anything about what breeders and the market's thinking longer term about the industry?
I think I don't think anything's changed too much. It's probably, obviously the thirst for quality is insatiable. I think when a quality horse walks through the ring, there's plenty of people that have bid on most of those horses, and that's the main point. And underneath that, you got to tread a little bit more warily and pick your market. But there's still a market there. When you think about a catalogue of the volume of horses we've offered, no catalogue in this part of the world has that volume ever, and to clear 80% and average 220,000 is exceptional.
Someone this morning made an interesting observation to me that, based off day one race fillies and mares, that physique and conformation really sold not above pedigree, but he could really sense that people were really harsh on conformation, pedigree, and physique, and they put those that made fair bit of money were really well put together.
Yeah, I think the physical attributes of a horse are highly sought after. When a good mare or a good quality yearling or a good quality weanling walks through the ring and they're physically, well above average, they're obviously highly sought after. I think a good fast race record goes a long way too. And I think those mares that showed speed or were highly performed on the track across the 2 days, they rose to the top of the market.
Obviously, beyond the highlight mares or the $1 million mares and probably the headline grabbers, there was some very good results at the lower end of the market as well that you've sold well above expectation.
Absolutely. There's mares that have been offered at other sales during the year that obviously exceeded the results that were asked of them at those sales. So we're pleased to be able to achieve, results on behalf of clients that have used us as their alternative.
The following segment is brought to you by Darley. Darley Australia has announced its 2026 stallion roster with 16 stallions to stand across Kelvinside in New South Wales and Northwood Park in Victoria. Collectively, they have won 43 Group 1 races, 81 Group wins and 12 champion titles, while they have 8 race or track records. Too Darn Hot headlines the star-studded roster. Alongside of him is Sensational Animo, whose first yearling set the sales rings alight this autumn. Former champion European sprinter Harry Angel continues to rise up the stallion ranks, while Victoria welcomes the return of Dubai's highest-rated son in Gayeth. Breeders looking for commercial benefit of first-season stallions have welcomed the recent retirement of Tentyrus and Observer to Kelvinside and Northwood, respectively. For full details, check out darley.com.au. So, Tim, off the back of that, we're also up the Gold Coast for another reason early in the week. We went to the Asia Awards on Monday night. We sponsored an award there, the Administration Ancillary Awards. Congratulations to Matt Harrington from Danny O'Brien Racing. It was nice to present an award to him, but it was a good night. I don't think I've been to one of those awards before, but the format seemed to work a little bit better this time around with, the way it was sort of mixed up. 7 awards. Bruce McAvaney received the Lifetime Achievement Award. But the other thing was sort of confirmed around that time. It was acknowledged at that function was Basil Nolan stepping down as chairman, is it? Or president? I'm trying to remember. President, isn't it? For the
It is president, but same.
Yeah, it's for the Thoroughbred Breeders Association, and we know Basil quite well. He's a gentleman, a great guy to deal with. Obviously, he's had a long period within that, but he's made a massive impact in that role. And Anthony Thompson's taking up that role with him.
It's those roles are thankless tasks, and as over Baz has been president for 12 years. There's been a lot of, and before that, he was on the board as well, and he's staying on the board. There's a lot happened from equine influenza. I think it was around 2007, and the pandemic, and obviously the foal registrations and all that sort of palaver lately. And there's been a lot of issues they're tackling, and at the same time, TBA's played a role, and through Ozhorse and things of helping like attracting the Yulongs and other foreign investment that's, betterment for the industry.
The other one I just want to touch on the breeding bloodstock space before we get to our feature interview is the mares that were sort of, I guess, Sedgenho clients before this year, and we're talking about there's a few significant clients on there, John Camilleri and Sheikh Khalifa's horses and a few else. They've sort of been distributed around the Hunter Valley in different places. Tim, you had a story on that earlier this week.
Yeah, Sheikh Khalifa, obviously bred and owned prior to Dubai, who stands at Coolmore, was raised at Coolmore. His mares are going back to Coolmore and Fairway. John Camilleri going to Coolmore. Kevin Maloney, who did own Sedgenho, he's splitting up his mares. I think sort of maybe up to a dozen are going to Sledmere with Royston Murphy, who was manager of Sedgenho quite a long time before Peter O'Brien took over. He's got a portion there. He's also keeping a portion at Sedgenho to support some of the Yulong stallions. Newgate's picked up a few as well, so it's sort of, domino effect, I guess.
So the last thing we want to end off on, Tim, is an interview you had on in the week with both Tom Magnier, Coolmore Australia, Tom Magnier, and Anthony Mithen from Rosemont Stud. And those two obviously have had a great association with Starspangledbanner, whose breeding career has, started off not very spectacularly. Had issues with fertility and a few other things. He went from Coolmore to Rosemont. He spent some time in Ireland, but his influence in the Northern Hemisphere is massive. We saw that to the fore on the weekend, where he had Gustard win the Irish 2,000 guineas. I think it was Precise, the name of the filly's daughter, that won the 1,000 guineas over there. For an Australian side to have that impact over there, it's really quite amazing story, isn't it, Tim?
I've got to thank Tom Magnier for sort of tracking me down and saying, hey, you should do it. Well, he said a story, but I think the interview, the way they told it, better for everyone to hear it than me try and put it into words. So from Mitho and Tom, I thank them for that. But it is Starspangledbanner's it is a great stallion. Sort of, he won a Caulfield Guineas, I think, at 3, and great sprinter, and he's done the job in Hong Kong, and hopefully, just the way he's going, probably will end up down here, shuttling and probably to Coolmore. If not, it'll be at Rosemont. So there's a bit to come. Coolmore really embraced him sort of later in his stud career, really, and giving him the quality of mares. So perhaps there's still more to come.
Funny, we're just talking about Starspangledbanner, and funny, I just looked up this morning, we're talking the press box, and it's like, geez, I'm forgetting about it. He's rising 20 Southern Hemisphere time, but he's still going as good as ever. The gelding that wasn't.
Yeah, the gelding that wasn't. I mean, that story has been repeated by me on many occasions. I was just saying to Tom how it was an act of desperation more than an act of in inspired wisdom. Having invested quite a bit of money to take 5% of the horse, I was cast if I couldn't get a few mares in foal. So, but at the same time, it took a little bit of courage to stand up to the might of Coolmore and their veterinary team and the team at Ballydoyle and say, listen, if you take a scalpel to that horse, we might need to sort this out in court. But that was probably a very much an idle threat. But it thankfully it was listened to, and we were able to continue on with his breeding career. And he was a horse that we just had to work with and let him come to us in terms of his fertility. There was no silver bullet that fixed him. We just had to be patient and let him mature. And thankfully that happened. And it's amazing how he's worked. It'd be fair to say, Tom, wouldn't it? He's worked better in Europe than he has in Australia. And I think that's testament to the
the adoration he gets in Europe as this sort of Australian sprint sensation that won 4 Group 1s and had this sort of weird early start to his stallion career, shook that off and turned up at Royal Ascot with, I think, 4 winners out of his first crop, and the Wow Signal and Anthem Alexander that won the Coventry and the Queen Mary. It was quite a feat, and that put him on the big stage in Europe. And funnily enough, I think Australians have taken a long time to be educated that his fertility was no longer an issue.
Yeah.
I know I found that. And when he went back to stand at Coolmore, I think Tom found that as well, educating the breeders that this horse will get your mare in foal at an average rate and an acceptable rate to how most stallions function. So the Australian market just sort of constantly wants to be reminded and listen to the negative on this horse, whereas Europe really embraced him and went gangbusters on him, and it's no great surprise that there's some champions to be bred up there.
And it's probably that reason he's sort of said rising 19, but because of his success up there, it makes more sense that he stays in Ireland, Tom, and doing a great job with those colts coming through. And I think Bred reports maybe one will come down for the Cox Plate this year. Is that potentially the plan?
Yeah, well, we're obviously, it was a huge weekend this weekend for Starspangledbanner. Obviously, Breeders' Cup winner, Dual Classic winner. He was an unbelievable racehorse, and we were, delighted to get him. And he was very good when he was in Ballydoyle. He was unbelievable what he did in Europe. Obviously, when he went to stud, there was a worry over his fertility at the start. And, there was a worry about, his future. But in fairness, we worked with Rosemont. They were very keen to give him a go, keep going with him. And, we obviously had a great association with Rosemont, and we knew that Mitto would work hard, of which he did. But I think that, while there was a worry about his future, I'm not sure that the boss would have ever allowed the scalpel to be taken to the horse. As you said, he was an unbelievable racehorse, and we knew that we were going to try everything to get mares in foal. And in fairness to Rosemont, he came down for a season and it went very well, and his fertility picked up from there, and the rest is history. And I remember being at home the last couple of years in Ballydoyle, and Aidan was praising this horse, Starspangledbanner, to the hills, and people in Ireland, they really got behind him. But it's kept the Danehill, the Danehill line going. Obviously, Danehill, Dancer, Swazier, and Starspangledbanner, and it's great for. It's great for Australian, racing that these horses, they can go, they can run up there, they can be successful and be successful stallions. And, you look at, stallions that have won had dual classic winners like that. And, they're elite stallions. And yeah, the rest is history. So listen, Gestad will obviously be the next stallion. So we know that the bloodline will continue, and it'll be great to hopefully have Gestad standing down here in Australia, and that, the road will be burnt out from the Rosemont truck sending all the mares up to Coolmore, Australia for Starspangledbanner. And I very much look forward to it.
Well, I'm happy to lead negotiations, but you do have Henry Longfellow with Coolmore. Maybe he goes down and stands at Rosemont, and Coolmore send the mares down there.
Yeah, it's funny. We're barracking for Gestad with a lot of vim and vigour. But there's a silver lining if he does get beaten, which he obviously didn't on Saturday night. He won with a leg in the air and showed his class. But there was a silver lining for me in that if he got beaten in a classic and just blotted the copybook here and there, I thought I might have been a sneaky chance to be able to shuttle him down to Victoria rather than the Hunter Valley and Coolmore, Australia. But I think he put that to bed on Saturday night. He's a very likeable racehorse who tries hard, seems to have a couple of quickens in a run, which is a rare commodity. And I hope we see him in Australia so that the Australian public can sort of jump on board. And to Tom's words, it'd be great to see the Star-Spangled Banner story continue through a son of his. And, I would be very supportive of a horse like that. And I couldn't imagine why breeders wouldn't be. But it's funny, I did, I don't think Tom knows this, but I texted his brother in Ireland last week when they put up a market for the Irish Guineas and said to MV at $1.50, how much do I have to have on to win enough money to pay for the Australian standing rights of Gustard? He came back with an obscene amount of money, to which I could only be covered by a man of perhaps his resources, but he wasn't prepared to spot me the bet. So he went round without a cent on, unfortunately.
But looking commercially for a minute, the Star-Spangled Banner line has been very popular in Hong Kong. That no reason Gustard wouldn't fit that mould as well as everything else and hopefully succeed down here and in Europe. But there would be that angle to pursue as well.
Yeah, look, he was a $400,000 foal, so he was a very attractive foal who's grown out into the most magnificent horse. I haven't seen him in the flesh, but Tom can speak to that. But he just looks like he's going to suit, Hong Kong market, Australian market, European market. He's a Coventry winner who's trained on to win, classic mile distance. And who knows, is the Cox Plate awaiting him later in the year? What a racehorse.
Yeah. And just one final thing, Tom, the story's out now, but Coolmore picked up, Sheikh Khalifa and John Camilleri's mares are now back at Coolmore, which was sort of a full circle moment, perhaps. Obviously, Winx was bred there and raised there at Coolmore.
Yeah, they've obviously raised, Pride of Dubai, Vancouver, Winx. They are the best breeders in the world. They're some of the best breeders in the world. John Camilleri and Tim Statemeyer, and it's a huge honour for us to have them back at Coolmore. And you'd enjoy getting out of bed in the morning, going around the farm, looking at the quality of horses that have arrived at the farm.
The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. The progeny of some of Australia's most appealing young stallions are set to take centre stage at next month's Great Southern Weaning Sale, for which the catalogue is now online. A total of 430 lots have been catalogued for the sale, which we conducted over 2 days at Oakland Junction, Thursday, June 11th and Friday, June 12th. Selling will begin at 1 p.m. on June 11th, where the first 160 lots will be offered, while Friday will see the remainder of the catalogue plus supplementary entries offered from 10 a.m. The catalogue includes the progeny of 105 stallions. Previous graduates include Blue Diamond winner Streisand and undefeated Kiwi Group 1 winning 3-year-old Well Written. Check out english.com.au for the full catalogue. Tim, a big week in racing news. Always is a big week of racing news, and whenever Peter Volandi's name comes up, there's always plenty to talk about. Announced earlier this week on Monday that, first of all, when it was announced that Andrew Abdo was stepping down as a National Rugby League CEO to take a job at Tennis Australia, the thought was straight away with that Peter Volandis, who's currently the chairman of the Australian Rugby League, might step into an executive chairman role. That is the case. He's doing it on a temporary basis for 4 months, during which time he'll take leave from Racing New South Wales. Graham Hinton will step up as interim CEO of Racing New South Wales in that time. There's nothing surprising necessarily in all those developments, but it does ask some questions about, I guess, Peter's long-term role in racing and what that looks like, and whether after 22 years that his long time is coming to an end within racing and he'll choose to focus on rugby league. Yeah, there's a few things that need to fall into place, but that's been the conversation all week, hasn't it, Tim?
Yeah, he has to, for that to, I think, even Peter would admit this, he wants to be executive chairman, I think. I mean, he said in the interview on Monday that he wouldn't be chief executive. He wants to be, so therefore it leaves executive chairman. And I've noted in other media, general mainstream media that, the likes of Barry O'Farrell, who's West Tigers chair or president coming out and support. And Barry, former New South Wales Premier, was of course a Racing Australia CEO for a time there when Peter was, well, obviously at Racing New South Wales. And then even Rebecca Frizzell, owner of the Titans, was a Racing Queensland board member. So there's sort of that racing connection there that they've come out and supported that, whether he can get it over the line or whether the board wanting to do it longer term. But they've got obviously the TV rights is a big decision that they're trying to get right. $4 billion, I think, they're chasing. So, big shoes to fill, no matter which way you look at it, and perceptions or opinions of people. Graham Hinton, I guess this is his chance to put his name out there that he is the one to continue on.
Yeah, and obviously we've got, probably the thing from the challenge from Racing New South Wales point of view is that, you got your CEO taking long service leave to go and work for a CEO for another sporting body, and there's questions around that and what that may mean. We're not going to pass judgment at this stage, but I think clearly Graham Hinton has seen this opportunity, and he came out and was quite strong on a Gareth Hall's program earlier in the week, sort of putting his case forward, the fact that he wants this role if Peter decided to step away. That would be a probably logical transition in terms of what we've seen with Peter, with Graham's long-term sort of role as sort of that deputy of Peter's over the years. That has raised some concerns elsewhere, but look, we know in New South Wales racing, there's politics are never far away. And we'll see that this week too. We've got, we're recording it Wednesday night, but on Thursday, Racing New South Wales and the ATC, Australian Turf Club, go back to court to sort out their, the issues about whether Racing New South Wales could put the ATC into administration. That's a court of appeal. Racing New South Wales have appealed the ruling of the Supreme Court. A lot of industry resources being put towards this one to resolve it. Racing New South Wales say it's very important for them to resolve it or get some idea about where they stand. On top of that, we've got the hazard review. Geez, there's a lot going on, Tim, within this one. I'm not going to go too much depth on it because things could change dramatically by the time people listen to things. But it's an important court case, isn't it, Tim, because it really does set the sort of agenda going forward.
Yeah, the precedents and different things like that. And as we'll hear from Julia Ritchie, it's the hazard review that could really reshape or shape the future of racing in New South Wales, and where it goes from here, and who has the power and all sorts of different things to probably modernise it from, when was the Act? Was it 1996 or two? So there's lots changed with gambling and wagering and all sorts of things. So people are sort of waiting on tenterhooks for that to come out, which is still, who knows, at least a month or two away, I think.
Yeah, and we'll use the opportunity to sort of dovetail into the interview with Julia Ritchie. Obviously, we spoke to Julia off the back of her buying some mares today. She bought Philosophical today, but it was interesting to talk to her about sort of where she feels the industry is headed, and I guess she feels like with the hazard review coming up, there's it's an interesting point of inflection.
Happening in racing politics this week, based in South Wales. Do you have an opinion of what's transpired?
I think racing at the moment in our industry is at a watershed moment. I think we've got the opportunity to affect some good change. We're all waiting to see what Brad Hazard comes out with. I think it's the first time maybe our industry has actually galvanised to actually put pen to paper, but meet with him, have opinions about our industry, because often we talk amongst ourselves and no one acts on it. So I do think it's a watershed moment right now. Peter going to football is a totally different issue. But at the moment, I think we're all waiting to see what the hazard review is going to. With any luck, he's been listening to what most people have all agreed on as the issues we would like to see addressed. And then the minister listens.
You obviously have got confidence in the industry, though, Julie, because you're investing in it. You believe in it, obviously. I mean, do you see this as almost like an opportunity for the industry to readdress and push forward and reset? And you sort of there's opportunities there commercially as well as some politics as well.
Look, I agree about that, but I do think it gets back to us getting back to basics on basic breeding, racing, our relationships, and it is about relationships. I grew up in an industry that was totally based on relationships, and I hate to say it, the old gentleman's agreement thing did work.
Yeah.
It may sound fuddy-duddy, but it did work, and I do think we've got the opportunity right now to actually start to rebuild a lot of those relationships between all of the stakeholders, which I think breeders, owners, punters, members of clubs, general public, we should be actually reconnecting with each other.
We've sort of seen this trend lately of the industry being, I guess, that concentrated ownership, all those sorts of things. I mean, do you feel like, that happens inside? Toast of love. Do you feel that's a positive? What do you feel that sort of thing? Obviously you're competing against the Yulongs, the Coolmores and all that sort of stuff when you're bidding for these horses and often getting out there. How do you sort of feel about that, where that sits?
It worries me a bit that we're going to polarize into bigger an upper bandwidth and we're going middle bandwidth, and we'll lose the whole lower. Because the lower bandwidth, usually you would ascend into the middle thing. So we've noticed that in the last few years. I know we welcome the big buyers because they create the market when you're a breeder.
Yeah.
But the other side of this, you want to be a breeder that's also commercial and also buying and to improve your mare band. It's still being able to invest in that.
Yeah.
Which not unfortunately, as I said, we've always relied on healthy competition.
Yeah.
But with the advent of the big five, so to speak, which we do need, but we need to still be looking to develop that middle bandwidth and also the entry level and the value that you could buy in on.
And people coming through too, like the fact is that you said the smaller become the middle, become the bigger over time. I mean, you haven't always been bidding $1 million mares. Like, it takes time to build up the confidence, the strength in your business to do that, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's also the industry where we're now looking at, when I grew up, like my dad's generation, there'd be 2, 3 or 4 in a horse, and that's where the value of buy-in. Now, I'll give Racing New South Wales their due with the investment into prize money, which gives more return to owners. But it's still, because the prices are all going up, it's no longer 2 or 3 or 4. We're 20 or 30 or 40 people in a horse, which it's then getting them to develop through. You think about Sebring, I think, was one, which was 20, and then they all went on to become into the next bandwidth. Are we going to still have that migration? I don't know. But it is still having that buy-in level, which people want to continue on with and end up having, not necessarily overly greedy about your return, but cover your costs, get a bit of money out of it, and participate in what is quite an amazing industry to be part of.
Yeah, because it is, we have these dividends and challenges and whatever else, but there's still, it's nothing like it, is there? I mean, you've obviously operated in different places, different industries or whatever else. There's nothing like racing, is there?
No, it is, and it's interesting to watch it at the race. I'm also coming from a race club background. I was on the board for 19 years. It's looking at younger generations. They are actually looking for somewhere where they can re-engage and participate because they don't actually have a lot of choices. And they do like coming to the races, and it is the old tribal thing. But I think as race clubs, particularly, we need to develop them outside carnival to understand, come to a lesser day and have just as much fun as you might on an Everest day or a Derby day or a Doncaster day.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's where all our generation, we're all friends now years later.
Yeah. And I guess too, there's that aspect of like, how you engage, whether you engage as a punter, engage as an owner, engage as a breeder, like it's all the same pool of people. It's all the people that are engaged across multiple areas, aren't they? So fragmenting that market can be a little bit dangerous when all those people are actually the same people. They're all engaged. The people like to have a bet. The people like to breed a horse. The people like to own a horse. All the same people, aren't they?
It mirrors what a breeding industry is about. You look at it. We all look at the relationships of families and what their contribution is to the experience of breeding. So we go through the breeding lines of who the first, second, third dams are, what they've all brought to it. And that's what we all do as participants in the industry of generation. Like, you have Dave, you Tommy, you have the Cummings crew, the Begg crew, even the guys who worked within, like O'Shea, who's now become, he's the Hawks crew. It's great to see that. And Waller, who's setting the next generation. So I do think that's where Wassing fills a big gap in the market in community as well.
Tim, just finally in racing, acknowledge that Queensland Derby and Kingston Smith Cup this week, some really interesting races coming up. There's also the Size Produce, which has always been a great race and one I've liked over the years, so much so that the Straight are sponsoring it this year, Tim. So it'd be good to see the Straight Size Produce up there, and I'm sure like they don't need me presenting the trophy, but I'll fulfil the duties if I have to, Tim, and do that right. But it's the Brisbane Carnival has been good. We obviously had a very interesting Doomben Cup last week. There's plenty to sort of. We are a historic Doomben Cup with Chris Wallace getting his 200th Group 1 win with Birdman. These Group 1 races in Queensland, of course, are always a source of interest. And, of course, we go to Eagle Farm this week, Tim, which is a bit of a switch up from the times at Doomben.
Yeah, obviously the English size in Sydney is a good race, but maybe
inspired by our good friends at English, we decided to step into that space. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be an interesting race. Chris Waller, of course, has always got some nice 2-year-olds coming through size into the JJ traditionally. I think his Tron Bolt's been scratched, who I was sort of a big fan of, but James McDonald's riding the stablemate, and I'm sure there'll be some good horses come through that race, whether they press on to the JJ Atkins or come back at 3.
Yeah, it's nice to be associated with good races as always. But the Derby and the Kingsford Smith are always good races too. And our good friend King of Rousseau, a shout out to our mate Dave Mee, who's been on the program before, who picked out King of Rousseau's in the Kingsford Smith Cup. So good luck with Dave and the team at Pulse Racing to try to get that horse. He's been an absolute AGM for the owners over the last little bit, hasn't he?
He's just continuing to get better and better from what I hear from occasionally he's talking to Chris Hay from Pulse and obviously Dave Mee, and yeah, all the reports apparently from Peter Snowden are that he's right on track, and hopefully he can either knock the Kingsford Smith off or the Stradbroke. It'll be one hell of a party, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly right. And yeah, it's good to see that the horse is getting better and better despite the bloodstock agents arguably going the other way. But no, only joking, Dave. Always good to see a good man got a good result. Tim, we'll round off with the in the wagering space. Couple of news here. We've obviously had a pretty epic episode already, so we'll get this one relatively brief. But Barney Evans to depart Sportsbet. Significant. He's technically not departing Flutter because he's actually been promoted to a global role, but he's been the head of Sportsbet since 2018. His over senior period at Sportsbet have gone from number 2 in the market to a clear number 1 in the market. He's been a transformative person within that business, real figurehead. I guess Barney's a very entrepreneurial mind. He's quite He's played a really key role in making Sportsbet not just another bookie. He's actually become a more of a social phenomenon. Now, there's challenges around that, whatever else, but I think, Australian wagering has changed significantly because of Barney Evans present at the top of Sportsbet. Doug Brown will replace him. From what I hear about Doug Brown, I don't know him personally. From what I hear, he's a very well respected internally, sort of renowned as someone who knows where everything works. Like he's very across everything, across the details, across Sportsbet and how that's going to work out. So interesting change, Tim. I think anytime you have a change at leadership at the top, we saw that at the TAB with Gil McLaughlin coming in. It's funny we talk about don't want to get too deep into footy coaches given the events of the week for your beloved Essendon, but people love to have personalities at the top. They see value in having people they can see there. So Barney has certainly helped push that sort of result at the top as much as the pressure's on Gil McLaughlin now to show what he can do at TAB.
I'm not sure whether Sportsbet needed the change, but Essendon definitely did. So anyway, this is not a footy podcast, but anyway, and if Dave Mee needs a defamation lawyer, give me a call as well. But I'll leave the wagering stuff to you. Sportsbet's obviously the dominant player at the moment, and they're as said, they've sort of been at the forefront of a lot of the marketing and all sorts of things. So I'm sure Doug will do a good job.
Interesting times. Okay, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by our fabulous sponsors at Darley and Inglis. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe. Send us an email, editor@thestraight.com.au. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you again next week.